Today we're exploring the flavors of India as I take a fairly well-known dish and make it even lighter. This is my Indian spiced cauliflower based on a recipe for Bombay potatoes, also known as Indian spiced potatoes. And I decided to lower the bites, points, and calories by swapping out the potatoes for cauliflower, but you could add them back in if you'd like. So if you'd like to see how this is made, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook and amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is one of mine, but it is based on an Indian dish that is often called Bombay potatoes or Indian spiced potatoes. And while I love that dish, sometimes I want it a little bit lighter so that I can have maybe some hamburger or something a little heavier in bites and points as a protein and not use bites and points on potatoes. So I thought, what better alternative is there than cauliflower? Now the first time I made this, I did use a head of cauliflower, and I decided that I wanted to see if I could do it with frozen cauliflower, because sometimes you just want to make it a little easier on yourself. So I wanted to make sure it would work with this as well. So that is what I'm going to be doing today, is doing the same recipe, only using frozen cauliflower instead of fresh. Now you can of course get the fresh and cut it into florets, or buy bags of florets. They also sell those sometimes. And if any of those florets are too large, you can cut them down. But I love Indian spices, I love curries, I love Indian food, so I thought this would be a perfect side dish. But you don't only have to use it as a side dish. You can use it as a sandwich filling in like pitas or in a wrap. You could also use it on salad in place of like a protein. So you can use this as more than just a side. It is pretty versatile. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I have some water boiling here ready to go, so let's go over the ingredients. I have here my cooking spray. Now, we're going to be actually cooking this in the same pot as I'm going to boil the cauliflower. So I don't want to mess up extra dishes if I can help it. But if you want to use a separate skillet, that's fine. But we are going to need some cooking spray to help us move things along. Here I have a 16-ounce bag of cauliflower, and this is just the store brand. There are some larger pieces from the field, so once they're cooked down, I will be cutting them up if they're too large, but we'll go over that later. And you want about 5 cups of cauliflower, 5 to 6. And that is about what a medium head of cauliflower will give you, as well as this bag. Here I have 1 medium onion that has been diced. You can measure that if you want. It's about a cup if you wanted to use frozen onions. You could eliminate them, but it does get rid of a lot of the flavor for this. So I wouldn't suggest it. Maybe cut it down, or you could switch it to something like shallots, which has a milder onion flavor. But it will take more shallots to get that 1 cup. Here I have 1/2 cup of frozen peas, and those have been sitting out. They'll also sit out a little bit while the cauliflower is cooking. You don't have to thaw them, but I do like them a little thawed out, so they'll cook a little quicker. Here I have 1/2 cup of water, and typically I don't put water as an ingredient, but in this case we are going to need this to make this more of a sauce that is going to coat our cauliflower. Here I have 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, and that is about 6 cloves if you want to mince it yourself, but I just get the jar and make it easier on myself. Here's 1 tablespoon of minced ginger, and that the same thing. I just use a little squeeze jug that I get in the produce section. And you want to make sure that it is the fresh ginger. You do not want to use the ginger that is in your spice cabinet. You don't want the dry ginger, you want the wet. Here I have 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, and that is all you're going to need to give this some depth of flavor, as well as give it some color, as a lot of Indian dishes have that reddish or yellowish or orangish hue. Here I have 2 teaspoons of dried parsley. You could use fresh. If you do use fresh, add it at the end, and you would use 3 times as much, so you would use 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley. Here I have 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of ground coriander, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of lime juice, 1/2 teaspoon of dry mustard, 3/4 of a teaspoon of turmeric, 1/2 teaspoon of table salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. In the recipe, it will say 1 teaspoon divided. We're going to put the smaller amount in with our onions when we start to cook them, just to help to cook them along, to get some of that moisture out of them. And the rest are all going to be combined. The lime juice is going to go in at the end, and you could use lemon juice if you prefer, and I'm just using the bottled stuff. As I said, I want to make this super easy on myself. So I'm just using the bottled. You could use fresh lime juice, obviously, but I like the lime better than the lemon with this, but either one, just to give it a little acidity, to give it a little more depth. Now this ground coriander here, if you don't have ground coriander, you don't want to find it, you don't often use it, so you're not going to buy it. You could use some more cumin instead, or some garam masala if you have that, or even some curry powder. Now speaking of curry powder, if you wanted to replace the cumin, the coriander, the mustard, and the turmeric, you could use a slightly heaping tablespoon of curry powder in place of all of those. I just thought this was more likely to be in your cupboard, so I thought, why not do this? But if you have curry powder, you can easily swap all 4 of those out for that. And that will be listed in the recipe. All right, so those are all of our ingredients. I have my salted water boiling here. I'm going to shuffle a few things around, and we're going to get started. Okay, so for the cauliflower, I am going to cook this. The package directions don't really tell me how long. I'm going to assume maybe 5 to 10 minutes. If you are doing fresh, you are going to boil it for about 10 to 15 minutes. And you are going to test it just to make sure it's crisp tender. You don't want it mushy or it's going to fall apart later. You want it to still hold its shape, but you want it to be kind of tender. So I'm going to throw this into our water here, and I do see a bunch of big pieces in here, so I'm going to be cutting those down later. But the directions for the frozen do say bring it back to a boil, then turn it down to a simmer, cover it, and let that cook until it's the desired texture. So I think it's going to be about 5 or 10 minutes. So while this is coming back up to a boil, I am going to mix together our spices: parsley, cumin, coriander, black pepper, dry mustard, turmeric, 1/2 teaspoon salt. And then I'm just going to whisk this all together. This is going to go into the pot later and heat up for a few minutes just to get those spices all activated. But as I said, you could replace the cumin, coriander, turmeric, and dry mustard with curry powder. It would be a slight heaping tablespoon, but the mustard is in there to give it a little bit of a spicy note, but also give a little nuttiness. Typically this is done with mustard seeds, but I thought dry mustard would be more accessible to most people, but you could swap that out for mustard seeds if you prefer. Sometimes if you look at the potatoes, you will see little specks of mustard seed in there, but we're going easy as we can do it with some ground mustard. But I have that all stirred up. I'm gonna get this cauliflower cooked up, and I'll be back to put this all together. All right, so the cauliflower, because it was frozen, only took about 5 minutes once it was boiling again to get it soft enough. I tested it on one of the larger pieces. Now it is sitting in a colander over there, cooling down a little bit, and then I will cut them into the properly sized portions. but you just want to set that aside and let that sit for a while. Now what I'm going to do, as I said, in the same pot that I cooked the cauliflower, I'm going to coat it with cooking spray and add in my onions and then just stir that around. This is on medium heat. I do want to get a little color on the onions as well as let them soften up. And that's going to take 3 to 5 minutes. Now, one thing I did want to mention, I forgot to when I made the spice mix, is I do also have in the recipe a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne, if you like it a little spicier. I'm not using that here because my partner Paul is not a fan of spice. I love spice, but he is not that keen on it. So I did not put that in, but it is in the recipe as an optional ingredient. But let me get this onion cooked down and we'll move on. Okay, so my onions have softened, they've gotten a little color. So now to the onions, I'm going to add in the garlic and the ginger, and I'm going to stir that. And we just want to get this fragrant, if I can see through the steam, which is only about 30 seconds. And I am smelling it. So the next thing we're going to add in is our spices. We're going to get those slightly toasty, let those flavors bloom, and then the tomato paste, and stir that through. Okay, so now we have the tomato paste in there all warmed up. I'm going to add in the peas and the 1/2 cup of water and stir that through. It's only going to take a few seconds for us to get the water to dissipate a little bit and leave us with a thick sauce. All right, so I've cut up the cauliflower. I did cut up the bigger pieces. If I had done this myself from fresh, I wouldn't have had to worry about cutting those up because I know they would have been the proper size. Now we just want to get this all stirred through, and we're going to just let this cook to meld all those flavors for just about 2 minutes. All right, so it's been 2 minutes. All I wanted to do was get that all combined and let that spice mixture seep into the cauliflower. I'm going to take my teaspoon of lime juice and just pour that over and then just mix that through, and that's it. That's all there is to it. I'm getting a nice whiff of that lime juice mixed with those spices. Heavenly. This is so good. I really enjoyed it. Paul enjoyed it as well. I hope that you're going to give it a try because it is very good. But you want to know about those bites, points, calories, etc. Well, this is going to serve 4 people, and it is only going to be 0 Better Balanced Bites or Old Blue points. It's around where the current WW point system is, so it's probably 0 on that as well. But if you are following calories, the calories for 1 serving would be 86. And if you are following macros, the fat would be 1.5 grams. Saturated fat would be 0.2 grams. Protein would be 5 grams. Carbs would be 15.9 grams. Fiber would be 5.7 grams. And sugars would be 6.2 grams for 1/4 of this recipe. But I hope that you enjoyed this versatile recipe and this video, and if you did, I'd appreciate the usual: like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video. Now, the recipe for this, of course, is going to be on the blog. I'll link directly to the recipe down in the description box, as well as to the blog itself. Also down there is a link to purchase my cookbook on Amazon. Now that link is for the US, but if you're in another country, just search recipes with Roy Cookbook and it should come up. I know Australia, for some reason, has been having difficulty finding it, but I'm not exactly sure why. It is supposed to be available pretty much everywhere. Another way you can support the channel is through my stores. I have 2 stores, my Fourth Wall store and my Zazzle store, where you can buy things like this apron or planners or t-shirts or coffee mugs or water bottles, etc. So if you can support the channel through one of those stores, I would appreciate that as well. You'll also find down there the link to my Amazon storefront. If I've used anything on the channel, it may be there. Also, if you saw last week's video where I did the unboxing and testing of the Caannasweis cookware with the detachable handles, The link to that is down in the description box as well. And there is a code until July 2nd, I believe, that you can use to get 10% off. Also down there is my social media, my Instagram, and a few Facebook groups that I'm part of. So check out the description box for all sorts of information. And if you're around tomorrow, Saturday at 2 p.m., I am going to be going live again. It's every other week that I go live on a Saturday at 2. That's 2 p.m. Eastern. If you can join me there, I'd love to have you. But for now, I think I will grab a pita and make myself a nice little pocket of Indian spice cauliflower. I hope you'll be giving it a try yourself very soon. So until next time, bye.